We've got a 5-step process, right? Now, I'll just quickly reel them off: clarify, evaluate, plan, implement, and manage.
So let's rattle that off. I think clarify can be easy to grasp, and I'd really love for you to dig into evaluate, because I reckon that's where some ambiguity can live. But clarify is clearly get a brief, work out what you've got, work out where your North Star is, work out what all the miles. So that makes sense. We've got to have a starting position. We've got to know a backstory. We've got to know some details. What do you want? What have you got? Where do you want to go? So I think that's pretty straightforward, but can you help the community with step 2, Ben? Evaluate.
Yeah, so what we're doing when we're evaluating is we're basically coming into the story around potential and opportunity. So that is where we're starting to play with the components of the household: money in, money out, what's available surplus, where can we look, what can we do around that type of story. So when we get to that stage, we are really starting to look at these types of things. We want to assess and analyze the information inside that household. So it's all down to cash flows in terms of that, because that is going to then set the stage for what you can possibly buy and can comfortably afford. Again, we don't want to get ourselves in too deep, and we want to be sensible about this. So we don't want to create that irrational behavior that I have to move now. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. No, it's not necessarily the case. We're going to assess that situation. So to finish off evaluation, what I also encourage everyone to do is jump onto the free My Wealth portal, right? You know, the TPC My Wealth portal, because inside the My Wealth portal, we have money stretch. I've been talking about cash flows and how it would impact that and future planning. So if you actually use the money stretch tool, you can actually see how that's going to change the impact or the future direction of cash flow. The next step, Bryce, is plan, right? So plan is number 3. Now, what we're doing there is, because we've done that analysis, we're able to work out what our buying power is, what our borrowing power is, and we're able to then start to think about the return on investment. So the return on investment comes back to what you mentioned before, which is yield and capital growth. So if you have really strong surpluses, then we encourage you to chase what we would consider a capital growth asset. If you have a safe and healthy surplus, then we may chase a balanced asset, which is a combination of a little bit extra yield, but also looking for some capital growth. And if you have small cash flows or small surpluses, I should say, but you still want to get into the property market, you're probably going to be buying at the lower end, but with a better focus on yield. So you're probably looking at yield points around that sort of 5 to 6%. We don't want you going into mining towns, but you may have to go into leisure and lifestyle locations to potentially get some of that higher yield. So that is what the strategy is about. It's sort of understanding, and that's your plan when it comes to executing on the property. When you finish doing that modeling around cash flows, what you're looking at, and as you move into the planning stage and you're building out your plan, you've got concentrations around the impacts on cash flow. So liquidity is king, and that's why we always say cash flow is king. Higher capital growth assets will have a stronger input from your surplus cash flow. A balanced asset will probably see, with these low interest rates, that property will be around cash flow neutral as opposed to negative gear with a higher asset. And then a yielding asset, a higher yielding asset with these historically low interest rates, could actually be in positive income territory. And so there's less impact in terms of the family budget.
Yeah, I think it's important because the planning goal is around making sure that you've got enough surplus and you've got enough household liquidity. And those two metrics are really summarizing what you were just trying to say there, because that's where the art meets the science around, okay, what price point and what works for one doesn't work for another. And I just really wanted that to land.
Yeah, well, when you're an A grader at this price, this is what happens. You are able to assess very confidently that buying price point. So if you are conservative and you don't do this exercise, but you still want to, you may execute on a $500,000 property because you are conservative, because you haven't made the cash flow visible to you, when you could have probably bought at a 600 level. Mm-hmm. And that's the point we're making. You get compounding return on the asset value So if that's 6% on 600 versus 6% on 500, that is over the time, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into your nest egg for retirement. So the people who step up and make the effort of actually doing that analysis well, only benefit themselves in greater, financial return.
What's the Goldilocks? Just too hot, too cold, but just right. It's a bit like that, isn't it? Where, at one price point it could be too hot, at another one it's too cold, you're not going to get it, but you've got to find it's just right. So step 4, so that's step 3, which is plan. Step 4 is implement. We are going to go through implement in detail in the next couple of weeks. We're going to go through the due diligence. We're going to go through the searching process. We're going to go through how to make an offer. We're going to go through some of the conditions. So step 4, implement, stay tuned for that. Then step 5, Ben, manage.
So one property will not get you to, call it $2,000 a week, right? So the managed piece has 2 elements to it. It's measure and monitor. When we're not saying you need a heap of properties, we've been very clear on that. 3 or 4 good property assets over a decent period of time is going to deliver you the returns that you're looking for. So what we want to be doing there is focusing in on the benchmarks, checking in on that property, and monitoring that. And the best way to do that is Money Smarts, because we've made a system that you don't have to constantly monitor. You check in once a month, and then you do an annualized program around cash flow. And if you're showing up and hitting those numbers, the property's working in the background to deliver you the outcomes that you're looking for.
Best way I summarize manage, Ben, is when you launch a rocket to the moon, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's on track about 3% of the time. So it needs constant little nudges all the way as it's making the orbit to the moon, right? So that's the best analogy for step 5, manage. You will need these little nudges that just tweak, just to make sure that you're on track, because it's not likely that the plan that you set up today will go 100% unchanged. It might go 89% unchanged, but it's not going to go 100% unchanged. So manage is about tweaking going forward. So there you go, folks. The prep is mindset. We are in the big surf. The 5-step process what we're going to follow. And then the final part of really setting this up is making sure that you have the right team around you.